Hello, everyone. Today's video is going to be me going through how to design a 12 marker designer study question. So, the 12 marker is unique. At the time of filming it is, you only get a 12 marker for a designer study question, which you typically only get in paper two, and you get it at the end of paper two. So you have been writing, you're doing paper two, right? You're an hour and 45 minutes into your test. You turn over the last page and you get hit by a 12 marker designer study question at the end of an hour's section of research methods. So you are tasked to design a study, and it could be a questionnaire, it could be a experiment, an observation, correlation, and just to show you, it looks something a little bit like this. Now, you get a STEM, as you typically always do with these sorts of things. So I'll just read through this one to give you some context. So, like I say, this is question 24 at the time. So you've been going for 23 questions. The psychologist focused on fluency in spoken communication in her study. Other researchers showed sex differences in nonverbal behaviors such as body language and gestures. Now, what you got to do, and in this case, you've got to design an observation to investigate sex differences in nonverbal behavior of males and females when they're given a presentation to an audience. Now, how you actually answer this question is you look at the 3 or 4 bullet points that they give you. Only answer anything relevant to those bullet points. Now, this is why your teachers can't help you with a 12 marker, because each time the 12 marker, there will be different bullet points. So in this case, they're asking you to look at the task for the participants, the behavioral categories, how reliability might be established, and any ethical issues. So one key thing to note down is that the 3 or 4 tasks they do will be relevant to the type of study they are asking you to do. So if they're asking you for an observation, then they're probably going to want behavioral categories. Maybe they'll look at event or time sampling. So you have 6, and obviously you get 12 marks to do that, but you've got 6 potential research methods that can pop up. So it's a designer study question, but they may ask you to design an experiment, an observation, a self-report, a correlations, and if you're really unlucky, content analysis or case studies. Now, they've never done the bottom 3 at the time of recording in 2022. They've never done those bottom 3. They've only ever hit you with design an experiment, design an observation, or in 1 year, I'll show you design a self-report. And even that self-report was within an experiment anyway, so they've not done it by themselves. So the key first thing, you need to know everything on the screen now. You need to know what's meant by the different types of observation. You need to know what's meant by a structured or unstructured or covert or overt observation, for example, or structured or unstructured interview. You need to know what's meant by correlations. You need to understand a content analysis. Failure to actually understand this will mean you will not be able to answer this. So in this case, you're being asked for the task for the participants, what the behavioral categories were in this case. So just a bit of a heads up, really. 2 words I would write down for this. You need to make sure your study you design is practical, as in sensible, right, and replicable. Practical and replicable. People that struggle on research methods actually do quite well in this question because they keep it simple. Please, in your exams, do not overcomplicate things. Don't try to make this world-changing piece of research that is going to get you noticed by the head of psychology in the world. Just keep it simple. I know that's boring. I know that's mundane, but the reason for that, by the way, is the more complicated the study you make, the more times you have to justify something, in order for it to be replicable, you have to explain it more. For 12 marks, you have 15 minutes. Now, just one thing to note here, and this is quite important, nowhere does it tell you to justify why you are doing those choices, why you're picking that behavioral category, why you're doing that particular task, right? So that is one example. Right. Now, just ask yourself, how would you go about doing that? So, for example, for the task for the participants, how many observers? Where do they sit? Where are they doing the task? If they're present, if they're doing a presentation, how many people are they doing a presentation to? How many people? How many observers? Like I say, how many observers are in the audience? And so there's no justification. If I then go to this one just here, if you just give me 1 second, I'm just going to pause it. So this one just here is quite a good one to use. This one's actually an experiment. So it clearly says here, design an experiment. Design an experiment to investigate the effect of indoor plants. So that's essentially your IV on mood, which is your DV, in office workers. For your measure of mood, you should devise a measure that would give you data suitable for testing at the ordinal level of measurement, which means they're probably going to ask you about stats tests. In this case, they've only got 3, but they're pretty heavy, these ones. For the design, you need to include what design you are using, what the IV and the DVs are, and operationalize them, and to identify any controls that you would do. So experimental controls, you're looking at standardization, randomization, random allocation, or counterbalancing. You'd maybe have to pick one of those 4 to demonstrate how you would control for these variables. You need to describe any special materials required, and obviously that is your measure of mood in this case. But then, and this is the tough bit, you then have to include reference to both descriptive, mean, median, mode, range, and standard deviation, descriptive statistics, but also inferential statistics. So you need to pick, okay, I'm going to use a Wilcoxon because of this. Now, these bottom 3 words are probably the most important. If you do not justify your choices, and if you miss these 3 words, you will get a maximum of 6. So in this case, you would have to identify your IVs, your DVs, everything like that. I think that's quite a hard one. What I would say on this, by the way, is when students design this, they almost always forget to identify what indoor plant they are going to use. Now, you might say that is a small detail, but how can I replicate, and remember, it has to be replicable, how can I replicate your piece of research if I don't know what plant you're using? You could be using a small spider plant or a frigging Christmas tree. So you need to be able to identify and operationalize your IVs and DVs. Now, I do have another one I do want to go through here. This one is another observation, sorry. So, again, it's got questions before, question 25. The feedback from one of the schools was that recreational screen time affected pupil social interaction. So, in this case, the IV and the DV are quite obvious here. Screen time is the IV. Pupil social interactions is the DV. So you need to measure this. The psychology decided to investigate this by doing an observation. And if you have a look here, again, the bullet points they give you are specific to the research method they're asking you to do. So in this case, type of observation with justification. Are you using time sampling or event sampling? If you don't know what time or event sampling are, you can't answer that question. So you need to know, as I say, you need to know all of this. What else? Dealing with one relevant issue. And then this bit down here is quite tricky. And you only ever get this for observations. Into observer reliability, how can you ensure that if you've got 2 observers watching the same thing, you agree on at least 80% of what you are observing? Pilot studies, training, operationalization, right? I want to finish on one more observation. So as you can see, observation comes up quite a lot. Very simple, this one. Design an observation to investigate how people spend their time at the gym. You need to justify the type of observation you are going to use. You need to operationalize those behavioral categories, whether you're using time or event sampling with justification, excuse me, and how reliability of data can be assessed. Now, luckily for you, I've actually gone through this in a model answer. So look at type of observation. So if we're looking at this type of observation, just look, as you can see, and feel free to pause this, by the way. I'm not going to read through this because that's a waste of your and my time when you can read it yourself, but it might be worth pausing the video now and just look at the level of detail that I've given. Right, the observation I would use would be a naturalistic, covert, structured look. My two observers would be covertly conducting observations for 2 hours, and I've given the time. Now, I've given the time, that's made it a bit more replicable. Three days during the week, make it replicable. But I need, why? What? Remember, what was the last word? Justification, right? Covertly observing gym members working out would be more beneficial due to the avoidance of demand characteristics and invalid observations. That's how you justify your decisions. It's likely that members would work out harder if they knew they were being watched, invalidating the data collected. Right, structured form, so on and so forth. Right now, in terms of operationalized behaviors, again, feel free to pause the screen if you want to have a look. Look at these. I have made these so that, for the most part, they can only be interpreted one way. And therefore, all of my observers are going to agree. Drinking or filling up the bottle of the water fountain, these are all specific to gyms. It's a tally chart. You can literally draw this up. It's this one that I think is probably the toughest one, because I might say, if the person I'm observing covertly, if I see them kind of look at a gym member and do that, I might say that that's socializing, but you as the other observer might not. So that's a little bit unoperationalized. I've then got, and again, feel free to pause this. I will just go down here as well. But whether you would use event or time sampling, and then finally, how you would do reliability. Now, my advice would definitely be to pause it on here as well, because I don't think most people would understand this, right? So remember, the idea is that we have 80% agreement between our observers, and it's about how you would observe that. So, to be honest, that is pretty much it. What I would advise is have a look at some of these paper twos. Have a look at some of these 12 markers, have a crack at them. You would have 15 minutes in the exam. Your teacher has almost no way of predicting what is going to come up. So my main focus would be know all of this really well. Right, particularly these 6, and obviously, in order to do these 6, you need to be good at all of this stuff. So, excuse me. Oh God, I'm not getting ill, am I? And all of this, by the way. So the reason why, just lastly, the reason why 12 markers are so difficult is because you need to be really good at research methods. Make it practical, make it replicable. But as always, I hope that was particularly useful. But if you have any questions, always feel free to email me. But I will try, just very lastly, I will try to put this model answer up on my Google resource site. So have a look in case you need it. Peace out. Hope that was useful.